Hey, folks.
Hello.
Hello. Posted a link to the agenda in the chat. Make
Gotcha.
sure you mark your attendance on the 23rd entry, please. Since we're co-locating notes, it'll get a little interesting.
Hi, folks. Sorry I'm late. I joined the wrong Zoom and I was sitting there waiting for everybody. So.
I figured as much.
I do that all the time.
And then you just style it out.
So today we are here to talk about source code management. Give me a minute. I had a note from Noam, so just give me a few here.
I think we have two things that we can take a look at here. One of them was the document that I shared, which is like a encrypt pad. The other one is the document that did Noam share it?
Yeah, he did.
In Google Doc. I can share screen if that helps. Okay. So, oh my God, which of the 7 zillion tabs is it that I want to just share here? Here we go. All right. Right. Okay. Okay. So this is the thing that I started to put together just to note, taking a look at the current kind of structure of the document that was very much oriented around, GitHub, big bunch of stuff, and then GitLab, big bunch of stuff, right? And there's so I started to take a look at what each one of these was and where it might fit in, and then I took a stab at putting together a kind of a set of high level sections, which would unify the document a little bit. So something around, access control and permission, secure user authentication, maybe then organizational management, repository configuration, and other hygiene factors, right? And that's not that. Then I started to kind of like sort these things, and obviously that hasn't been done all. I haven't this is just kind of to demonstrate the idea more than anything else. And then I think stop sharing that, and then I'll start sharing this other thing, which is the document Noam shared. What's that? Yes. And that, again, Noam's taking each one of the items and putting them into a kind of category. And, so it's interesting. I think we came up with some of the same ideas in terms of organization, repository, members, and then miscellaneous, which could map onto like my hygiene factors thing. Yeah, so I think basically we're converging on something that, that we could take Noam's categories. I could take Noam's categories, map them onto the Markdown structure that I put in to the Markdown document, and then sort the items in the Markdown according to that structure. And then that could give us a good start And that's kind of my kind of statement of where we're at currently with this. Thoughts?
Could you post a link to the crypt pad? Is that something that can be shared?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just sitting. I posted already above, but I will post it again. And the only reason I'm using CryptPad is because I find it convenient, a convenient editor for Markdown, because it displays the Markdown over on one side and then the kind of rendered Markdown over on the right. And we happen to have a self-hosted CryptPad that we use for tag minutes. We use this for taking our minutes all the time. CryptPad can be a bit of a drain on CPU, however, because it's constantly decrypting and encrypting things in JavaScript as you type. So and most of what's in the CryptPad is the existing document. I wrote a little boilerplate intro more just so that we could get some idea of to give an idea of kind of where I see the document going, more than it's not, don't read it for the text, but it's just like, it feels to me like we need a general intro, and then each section we need like a little bit of intro text talking about why this is important, or what the section is going to talk about. I'm not talking about, we don't need to write reams of text here. Keep it simple, but intro the topic. And then in each one of these things, we can then sub categorize it as, in GitHub do this, and in GitLab do this, basically, right?
Have like a table or something that links off or whatever.
Yeah. Thoughts?
I like the idea.
Yeah, I like the idea a lot too. Yeah, because it's similar to what I had, was like organization repositories. The only thing that was maybe slightly different is sometimes there's like the concept of members in an organization, but there's also the concept of so-called collaborators or folks who belong to repositories. So sometimes I kind of like merged them or talked about them inside of organization or inside of repository. But it kind of overlapped. So it was a mix of both. So it's a members one that's a little fuzzy. I can overlap with those both places.
Right. So can you expand on that a little bit? Is that
Oh yeah, let me expand on that a little bit. When it comes to like, there was just, at least for our cases, that we wanted to have in repositories people to be organized around teams. So because of that, we actually had to do some things in the organization settings and then come down to the repo and do a little things differently. And we had to have all these policies around who can be a member of the organization and how do we add people in repositories. So it's just like the member part of it, or the membership part of it, it just kind of got a little, collaborators got a little bit like bled into both of the places. So sometimes it's hard to talk about it in isolation.
It sounds to me like it's about where actual organizational structure meets GitHub's version of or GitLab's version of how users and accounts and groups are structured, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, that might not be a total match because, right, okay.
Yeah, it just meant that you talked about it in different areas and then you kind of cross-reference them. And so that's going to be kind of like an interesting question of where do you put the content?
Right.
And I'm not too I know GitLab a little bit, but I'm not too sure how GitLab's set up.
And,
Yeah, that's kind of, I'm not as familiar with GitLab either. So, yeah.
and maybe we up level a little bit and talk generically about these repository access controls or group membership management. And that way that would allow you to have the flexibility to talk to each of the styles, how they implement it differently.
Yeah, that sounds like the right plan anyway, because although we're talking GitHub, GitLab, there's a number of other systems and things can change even within GitHub. I can imagine them changing, particularly, hey, how do you get access control? So,
Mhm.
higher level concept, drill down. Okay, here's how you do it here.
But my thought was that if we do this right, then we could easily layer on a third, fourth, platform on top of the existing structure, right? So if we shouldn't be authoring it for two things, we should be authoring it for N things. if you
Yeah.
see- Yeah.
Maybe it might help if I just quickly share my screen, and I'm just
Mhm.
going to share. This is just going to be an organization. And this bleeds into some of the discussion I had. And so this is similar to the document that I was thinking of sharing after I clean it up. But what I want to kind of catch your attention, this is the table of contents. And so where I talk about organizations, and then under that, managing roles and access. And then I talk about organizing repositories, just because this is like a topic that's probably not really, this is probably specific to each company. So it probably won't need to go into a particular overall document. But if you look under repositories, under there, I also have managing roles and access. And then under project setup and support, this was more around like the security and all. And then I have different, so that's kind of like how I would organize it. And somewhere down at the bottom, we also talk about how do you configure GitHub, and this is where I go deep into what you need to do for each settings. And then I split it into required and recommended. Again, required are just like obvious things like two-factor authentication, but there's some things where there's like arguably whether or not you want to turn on some aspects, just depends on the style of what you work, how you work. But that's kind of like overall calling your attention to organization and repositories and how the roles and the access is split up into each of them. So I didn't really have a separate one for membership, but it could have happened.
And we
That's
may, since the guide is for people that aren't our employees, so it'll be hard for us to say things are required, but maybe we flip your required suggestions to make them the best practice recommendation. And then if there's anything else under recommended, we may want to potentially bump up or say other things to consider or optional.
Yeah, you could probably use the same language that you use in other best practices guides, stuff like that.
And Christine, you said you could share that.
Yeah, what I was gonna do is take that document that you had. We're also internally reviewing it. And then once I got that, I could just like take all of the bits that are specific to F5 and make it more generic. Because we put in there things like how we handle some of our different GitHub orgs. So that wouldn't be relevant.
Two questions, if I may. One is, are any of these covered by scorecards? Do you know? And if any
Yeah.
could be, in the process of doing this, we might feed stuff over to scorecards.
Mm-hmm. What were you thinking, for example?
I mean, this entire list of recommendations.
Ah,
Well,
okay.
there are certain
Not
things
just
that
this
are
one.
definitely covered by scorecards. I think the license, presence of a license is one obvious example. I think that's in here.
Yeah, we might want to have a marker that says that, there's something, even if it's not exact, although frankly, if it's not exact, yeah, license is probably a great example. Scorecards can tell if a license exists. It can't tell if
Yeah.
it's a good license or the one you intended, or it's not in, it's not just binary bits.
I think the scorecard point came up in previous session, and actually we were talking about the fact that it's the repository best practices is aligned quite well with the scorecard, but there are also the other types, asset types, which aren't so like the organization best practices and server best practices, and so those
Yeah.
are like it's.
Here's what I'm thinking. I mean, as much as possible, we want to automate these things. So if something is automatically detected by scorecards, in particular, if it's completely covered, I guess that's really the point where, as I think this through, what's the use case? If something's completely covered, then I'm going to know, oh, great. If I'm using scorecards, that'll all be recovered. Or maybe if I'm doing best practices badge, that's already done. Right. Oh, what's missing? I'm going to especially look for the ones that aren't covered elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, and potentially there are things that scorecards is missing, and we can file
Right.
PRs to help improve that.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. Because Legitify, I was using Legitify, and at least in my example, and you have the option to run scorecards. So sometimes I was running scorecards on some of the repos, or sometimes I was running scorecards by itself. So I was like cross-checking and cross-referencing what scorecards has. So that was also very useful in putting together the document that I had.
Yeah, and actually one of the policies under the repository tabs that Noam created was that OSSF scorecard should be above 7.
Yeah. Right. And literally, I kind of took that and said, okay, as a better practice, try to get your repo to be above 7.
Yeah. Although
It's a little arbitrary, but okay.
Yeah,
it's a lot arbitrary, and indeed, we're doing. We've got a list of things that we want to work on scorecards, including implementing against GitLab and adding a lot more, a lot of improvements. So, for example, there's a vast number of tools it doesn't detect. It doesn't detect most CI systems. And so the scorecard value is actually going to be lower than the system really is in many cases. So we want to, there's nothing problem with the concept. It's, we want to do better in execution.
Parenthetically, I'm trying to mobilize some Sneak people to help with scorecard development.
Awesome. That would be great. More the better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there were a few GitHub Actions related policies that Noam also pushed to the scorecard project a while ago. So
Okay. At least file them as issues so they don't get lost.
So at the very least, it seems like in this document, we should be noting when something is already tracked in scorecards and linking to the documentation for that test or the documentation in scorecard somehow, or just having like a scorecard icon in the document.
Yeah, that's really good, because that's what I was doing. I was going in and finding, where is this thing in scorecards, and I was looking for it and reading it up and trying to figure it out. So yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Is there anything related? I don't know if this is something we want to get into, but at least for us, because we care about like the project health or status in some sense, is that something we're thinking about for the SCM project, some way to signal that this project is actively maintained, or that's something else entirely and not related to what we care about? for example, you could add badges on your projects to state that the project is active, and there's like so-called repostatus.org was brought to my attention as somewhere that you can have these badges, and if you could have a badge that says it's active, inactive, unsupported, etc. Is this something that might be useful? It might probably only make sense for GitHub, so maybe not.
I mean, the general concept applies elsewhere. I don't know if, and again, this comes back to that split between, the high level, make it clear. What I would say the high level is make it very clear if it's active or whatever. And then here's how you do it on GitLab. Here's how you can do it on
But I mean,
Yeah.
it feels to me like what the guidance that we would be giving is basically be active or mark if something's inactive. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, okay.
That one, not the first one, that one.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, be transparent, or let people know, basically.
Right. In fact, there's a number of cases where research projects, I've actually years back, I was pushing this very hard with, partial maybe success. There's a lot of research work where, code is produced in order to demonstrate a point. There's no expectation the code's going to be maintained, but showing your work is really important to being able to determine, is this, are the results valid? Maybe I want to build on it myself, all that good stuff. But again, transparency.
I think that's important. That's really interesting. I hadn't heard about repostatus.org. That's something that I want to take a look at for my own organization, because we're going through a kind of audit process where we're looking at the hundreds of open source repos that we've stuck on various GitHub whatever organizations, and some of them are quite active. Some of them are like haven't been touched in 3 years, and some of them there's just a really wide variety. I'm sure many organizations have the same problem, especially ones that have been going through like growth over the past few years and acquisitions and stuff like that. So anyway, just parenthetically, that's an I do think that's a very interesting topic, and it's something that we should be putting in here in terms of the transparency factor. Yeah, that's great to raise that, Christine.
Okay. Yeah, because whatever you're going through, we're kind of going through, and I know a lot of people, as you said, are probably doing the same thing. And if we can just like at least guide them in a particular way, that might make it easier for everyone.
I haven't seen this before, but I like the concept. I mean, we can pitch this around and say, hey, what about doing it this way?
Mm.
Do the badges automatically fade over time, like using some kind of CSS color?
It does not look like it. But it determines the project status by searching for a string matching a specific pattern in a set list of possible files.
Mm.
So no.
Okay, so actions that we want to take based on this discussion.
One other thing.
Mhm.
You may have done it in your topics. There's the thing that I was thinking we may come across later is related to just because I had to do something around operations, and I think I mentioned it last time, almost like there's some things that you do the first time and there's some kind of like ongoing maintenance. And I don't know if that becomes a topic. It's not really related to, just kind of like, well, where does that fit into like a theme or a topic? Because things like how do you look into the security scans, or what do you do with audit logs and all those different things. Is that a thing that we should be thinking about? Operations?
I definitely think that the topic of maintenance and operations, ongoing operations is important. There are things in here already that are like, maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, I don't think that there's enough in here that actually that talks about that.
Yeah.
Can I push back a little on that? Because
Sure.
for a lot of open source software, it's specific libraries, and a lot of open source projects only release source code. There is no operation. Well, the operations is the ability to acquire the software. That's their version of operations. They aren't responsible for or typically even know about, the production side of, say, a website. That's not, they have no interaction with that. They don't know about that. At most, they release the compiled package.
Yeah, but there's a like, right. There are certain automated processes though that are like scans, like security scans.
Oh,
that-
right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think those are totally in scope. Yeah, I'm sorry. When you said operations, I thought you meant like operation in production.
Oh, no, this is more like, in my
Okay.
document, I said, because the people who may be using this, or I had like different personas, and one could be like the person who has to set
Okay.
up a new GitHub organization, set up a new GitHub repository,
You're
archive
fine.
a GitHub
Got
repository.
it. Got it. Okay. No, it's just I misunderstood. Thank you for
Gotcha.
clarifying.
Yeah, so,
There are a few like processes related policies in the asset that no one created. There are stuff around like GitHub Advanced Security, like dependency review should be enabled, and secret scanning, and
mhm.
this type of security scans. So as long as it's a part of something that the SCM is supporting, then I think it's definitely in scope.
Yeah,
Right. So maybe it's worth noting, maybe that's another high level topic.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you think about, again, going back to, if you think about who's going to make use of this document and then figure out how they would like to read it, I guess that's probably the point.
Do we want to have, I don't want to talk about personas because then we're going to end up talking about like, we don't have a set of personas across OpenSSF that we all agree on or something. But do we want to talk about personas for a second?
I know, because coming out of this, one of that would be like the person who is managing obviously a person who's managing a whole bunch of GitHub organizations, or somebody who's just a project maintainer. And then the person who's running the operation, who's tasked with actually turning these things on and off, or responding to requests that come in where I want to be added as a member to the organization. So that kind of thing those are the kind of like the personas that I had, but they could be more.
I mean, I think developer, who is kind of like using the a repo on a day-to-day basis, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think, well, I've noted those down. I think those are really good
Mhm.
places to start. Do we have other places where we've documented similar personas?
Jay has said working on it, so I didn't know if that's in reference to the personas.
Yeah, so that I'm working on a taxonomy, a proposal to do like a taxonomy sig that spans across the entirety of all the working groups and all the initiatives and projects everybody's working on to bring taxonomy, personas, and everything under one umbrella to be worked on and then could be spread out across the entirety of the OpenSSF, so we're all on one sheet of music. That's something I'm currently trying to write. Once I get a draft done, I will circulate it so that everybody can put the 2 cents in. But that's something I'm currently working on now.
Do you think you can take into account Christine's list of things that in your draft?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I want to take what so in the best, the working group. I mean, working on that you have that one terms and definitions guide that's being, that glossary that's being worked on. So I want to pull that. I'm pulling from one of the papers written by one of the PhD students that attend some of these meetings. I'm pulling from that. We have a lot of stuff going on across every single working group. Everybody seems to have their own ideas, their own thoughts about this one thing. I want to pull from everyone, bring everyone into that one SIG, sit around the table, a virtual table, so to speak, and decide once and for all, what do we agree on or disagree on, at least for the OpenSSF.
Yeah.
Aspirationally, I want to take all, a few more of the communities under the LF, and then maybe produce an LF taxonomy so that all the other communities are all under the same sheet of music. That's aspirational. But at least for the purposes of the OpenSSF, foundationally, I want to get one sheet of music down. So, because Dan and Christy, we attend all of David, we attend all of these meetings, and in every single one of these meetings, we all have a different term, definition, persona for the same things. It's crazy. Like we should be coming together. So that's the proposal I'm gonna write. I want all the help in the world on it because it requires that. So once I put something down on paper, I'm gonna circulate it, and might take a while, but we'll get there and get a one sheet of music situation for these taxonomy, personas, terms and definitions, and everything else.
Yeah. I think that the personas that we're talking about here, we may not have dealt with before in other working groups, because we are talking about things that are very specific to repo configuration and kind of the operations people and stuff like that. Although we may already be thinking about it. Yeah.
I mean, so in the securing critical projects working group and the securing software repos working group, we have I don't. So those are the 2 meetings that I don't attend very often, but we don't know what's going on in those meetings as well. They could very well use a lot of the stuff that's being talked about here in those meetings, because those personas are relevant in those working groups as well. Yeah. So to get them into that guide that we want to work on in that SIG is extremely important too, right? I mean, that just works across the entirety. So if we can get those people in the room even and have their input, that'll be solid as well.
Yeah, and I should note that the Salsa folks have a number of things about source as well as build. There is a challenge. In order to come to consensus, they've decided to do things in stages. So they've decided to focus on build and then go backwards and start doing stuff about source. Again, probably a useful cross-check.
Yeah. I think that what might be helpful, triggered my mind, is also, I know OpenSSF obviously has a bunch of repos and probably I just want GitHub org, but it might be interesting to see them test the output of what we create.
No, not them. Us.
Thank you, David.
Yeah. I had earlier it's actually on my do list to kind of walk through the GitHub.
It's called dogfooding.
Yes,
it is indeed. I think I have managed to successfully dump the problem on someone else because my schedule looks insane. Delegate and delegation is good. It may bounce back to me eventually. But ideally, yeah, but I completely agree with you. It is the best way to know if something works is to try it.
Yeah, no, I've been just, again, parenthetically, I mentioned we've been doing an audit of all of our public repos in Sneak, and one of the things that we've collected is scorecard data for every single one of those.
Mhm.
And it's all sitting in a spreadsheet right now, and I won't comment on the quality of the I'm
No
not sure that
problem.
we're living up to the 7 metric. Let's just say.
By the way, we can actually use Legidify. If any of you is an owner of the OSSF organization on GitHub, then you can just run Legidify and get the results straight and see what's good and what's not.
Yeah, it was very helpful for me. Legidify.
Sounds like that's an action on you, David.
I mean, we can use it right now. There's nothing for me to do.
No, you have to be an owner.
Yeah, or you can give us your personal access token, and then we can do it for you if you want.
Yeah, about that. That probably isn't best practice. Yeah, but I mean,
Okay,
go on.
I was just gonna try and draw out some actions. Who's got, so Christine, you're gonna
Mhm.
work on getting us your organization of
Yeah.
the things. I can start taking a look at the document that Noam circulated and merging that organization of topics into the markdown version that I created, and trying to move things around, and come up with another kind of straw man that I can share with the group. And somebody want to take a crack at the personas? Or do
Yeah.
we already have what we need there?
Yeah, because you put that information in there, and I think Jay can just take it and probably make sure it's addressed in the work he has.
Yeah. And then how should we, does somebody want to try and come up with a way that we should reference scorecards?
Oh, like where to reference it? Because I know
Yeah,
I
how to
yeah, I know
reference it, like what it should, what it should look like, I suppose, in Markdown.
Yeah, I know in my document, like I said, I referenced it in the operations or in the setting up of a new repository, or like the ongoing thing, make sure it's always above 7, run it, turn on GitHub Actions, scorecards, GitHub Actions, and those are the kind of recommendations I had. But I don't know where else you'd want it to be.
I think maybe what we just need to do is continue to are people happy to collaborate in the CryptPad space that I set up on
Yeah,
this?
that's fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
We can try it out and see how it goes.
sure. It's open source. That's the other thing that I like about CryptPad.
That's a cool thing.
So
Although
it's high reliability.
Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, all software is unreliable unless proven otherwise. And
Yeah.
it's rarely proven otherwise.
The CryptPad folks gave a good talk at Boston, by the way. It was in the security track. It wasn't, it was interesting stuff. So yeah, we can just keep working on this and then circle back in 2 weeks' time and take a look, and hopefully we have a better draft by then.
Sounds good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
See Rob.
Thank you, Dan and Christine, and
Hey,
everybody for
everybody.
showing up today.
All right, thank you.
Are we doing an okay job?
You're doing great. Jay, can I borrow you for 30 seconds?
He's probably on the
If
treadmill.
you're not too busy on the
Yeah,
treadmill, yeah.
No, you're not. You got not on the treadmill yet. Not on the treadmill. Had some weights in my hands though. Got it.
Oh, well, do you have any available time today or tomorrow to chat about the persona taxonomy
You
thing?
took Crow. I thought it, and I sent the thought out to you, and you picked it up, and here we are. I was good. I had every intention on messaging you right after I got out of here to say, hey, do you have a couple of minutes just to go over a list of things that we should be looking at for the proposal? So that was every bit of what I had on my agenda to do today. So yes.
So I'm available at 1 p.m. Eastern and 4 p.m. Eastern today.
4 p.m. Eastern it is. Let me take a look at the calendar here just to make sure. Yes, 4 p.m. Eastern. I am absolutely for a second. Let me not speak too soon. Let me take a look at this of the OpenSSF calendar.
We'll sync up on Slack then. Yeah, we'll get our proposal together for.
Yes, I'm free.
wanna
I'm
move
free.
forward.
That's right after the diagram of society meeting.
Well, we're
I'm
going to
free.
cancel that. I
Oh.
actually have to talk to real customers today twice.
Okay.
Here.
Okay,
You
good.
can see I dressed up.
Uh,
Uh,
all right, good deal. Good
Yeah,
deal.
so
Well,
I-
I'm free. I'm free regardless. So
Okay.
yeah.
Hey, before we go, is that CryptoPad thing visible to others, or is that really only visible to you, Dan?
It's visible. The way that it works is you can share a URL, and you can either
Okay.
share a view only URL or an edit
Okay.
URL, and the credentials are all in the URL.
Okay.
So if you want
Would
to
it be
share it a view only version, you can
Yes.
just share the view URL. The URL that I have sent to the Slack is the edit URL. So anybody who has that URL can edit the document
Okay.
anonymously. You don't have to be logged in. So it's a little
Can you
bit,
post,
you know.
Can you post the read-only URL? I wanted to stick them in our notes so somebody looking at it has a chance of finding this thing.
Read only URL is here.
This is okay. Just
Thank you.
And I can stick it in our notes if you want. Yeah.
I'm gonna try to
I
beat
see.
you to it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right.
and thanks again to everybody. I'm very excited to see this and our C guides moving forward. Great energy. Appreciate everybody's help.
Take care. Thanks.
And I'll chat with you later, Jay.
Cheers. Bye.
Cool. Bye.